Hello again, and welcome to the InScope podcast. My name is John Scott. I am the CEO and co-founder over at ScopeStack, where we solve all your IT services scoping needs. I have MJ Patton here with me today, the CEO and co-founder over at Alveo. So MJ, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, hey, I think did we overlap while we were both at Insight? I feel like we were trying to figure out if we had or had not worked together at some point.
Yeah,
You're on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast, but other than that.
Right. Right. I think we were there, but I never actually ended up working with your group.
Yeah.
So we never ran into each other, but we were there.
Right. Yeah.
Small world.
It is a small world, right? I mean, I tell people that all the time. And so I'm always talking to people that I have, worked at the same company with, and it's kind of crazy, everything that just keeps coming up. But tell us, what are you doing now at Alveo? I have an idea, but tell everyone else. And then I want to kind of dive into that.
Sure. So Alveo is a holistic go-to-market strategy firm. We focus on the IT industry. So we work with IT service providers as well as technology companies that are in the channel on their go-to-market strategy. And when I say that, because go-to-market right now is such a buzzword, everyone's using it and,
I say GDM just to be even cooler. That's what I say.
Yeah, like GTM. But they're using it in a multitude of ways, and it ends up being a noise. When I'm talking about go-to-market, I'm talking about how are you taking your product or solution out to the market, and that includes multiple factors, right? There's planning that's involved, looking at the competitive nature, looking at your core competencies, looking at what's the best route to market, and then all of the strategies across sales, marketing, customer success, delivery, making sure all of that is aligned all the way down to execution. And so I think everyone throws it around as a term of, it's go-to-market strategy, and they think of it as sales or it's marketing, but it's so much more than that.
Sure.
And
yeah.
our firm looks at it from a holistic standpoint.
Yeah, which I think is really interesting because a large part of the conversations we have on our podcast, right, are talking about most of the time sales, pre-sales, and then pre-sales to post-sales, right? Because we kind of fit in between, we kind of touch all those, but I mean, we're focused on the pre-sales side. And so we're all talking about, okay, we already have an opportunity that we're scoping and we're talking to clients, but there's all this stuff both before and then after, actually, that you and your firm kind of come in and help, right? And the services piece is a big part of that potentially. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, in services specifically, what I'm finding is companies that are service-based, they're highly interdependent when it comes to their functions. And what I mean by that is the decisions you end up making in delivery have a huge impact on then sales and marketing and vice versa, right? And so unless you have all of these functions really intertwined and maturing at the same rate, you end up actually not growing to your full potential or hitting, scalability and sustainability in the most efficient way.
Yeah. Well, I often talk to pre-sales organizations, hey, work with the delivery team, the guys and girls that are doing the work, have them be a part of the how do we price this service, what goes into this service and all that fun stuff. And I think kind of what you're saying is like when we're starting to develop a go-to-market strategy, like there needs to be representation or players from like all the teams, I would imagine.
All of the teams.
In order to have a comprehensive go-to-market strategy. So like where do y'all start in like trying to untangle all that stuff? Or maybe it's not tangled.
Yeah, well, it is really so I like to use this analogy. Think about a knot, right? If you have a pair of headphones, right? And they get all intertwined and you're trying to pull apart this knot. What happens if you only focus on one portion of the knot?
You just make it tighter. I know this because I have kids and shoes. Yes.
But exactly, it ends up constricting, right? Business is the same way. It is so interdependent and it's so cross-linked that if you only focus on one area of your business and you keep pulling on that without thinking about the impact of the rest of the organization, you are just constricting its ability to grow. The only way that you can massage that, or I guess lubricate the knot, is by adding cash flow, right? And so that's why you end up having service providers that get PE funding, because then they get that influx of cash to try to separate it out. But if you approach it from this mindset of my decisions impact everyone else and how do we work together to reach our outcomes, right? You're pulling on each part of the business in unison, right? And that's how you end up growing. So when we work with a client, what we end up doing is we talk to the executive team, because it's very clear to see if everyone is on the same page.
Yeah.
Just with the questions that we ask from the entire spectrum of go-to-market, everything from planning all the way to execution, and seeing if everyone is included and understands how it all feeds into each other. And from there, we break it down into the teams.
Yeah, because I mean, we've all been in organizations where, you know, I'm in pre-sales. I have no idea what delivery's doing, or I have no idea all the work that went into getting us as a pre-sales engineer to the table of a sales opportunity, right? There's a bunch of stuff there. And even before that, even more detached is pre-sales from marketing, or how do you get the word out there, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because, again, we always talk about like, hey, we're as a pre-sales team, you know, the post-sales team is mad at us because we're just scoping stuff. They weren't involved in it. And then we're mad at sales because they're just bringing us into stuff that is not qualified. So we're all blaming each other anyway. So I think it's a unique perspective to say, okay, well, you don't have to be big to do this well, I wouldn't imagine, right? You don't have to have PE backing. You don't have to have all this cash to do it well. Like, as long as you're thoughtful about it, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's all about being very deliberate about, you know, where do you spend your time? And when you bring everyone together, everyone comes to that solution together, right? It's about what's best for the company rather than what's best for my own function area.
Yeah.
And I think,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I would say that that's a problem that we see with all of the silos in the organizations, right? Because everyone's in it for themselves. And this is why I'm like, you need to have someone who's helping facilitate this that is outside of P&Ls, because that way they can keep everyone in alignment. As soon as you have a number that you have to hit and there's all of this pressure of like, we need to deliver on this, you start to lose sight of what is best for the company. Sometimes it means that, hey, you need to slow down so someone else can speed up, so that way you guys get to the same stage, right?
Yeah. So scenario for you, I was an engineer at an MSP. I left. I'm starting my own MSP. Let's say there are 5 of us in the business now. Like, where is there a single place to start? Again, I know you have a ton of information like on your website that I've looked at a lot, but is this one whole work stream? Like, do you have to do just kind of? Can you give me just a starting point, maybe?
That's a great question, because we're currently dealing this with one of our clients. It's a very small MSP. It's been around for 18 years. So, but they want to take their business to the next stage, right? And they've focused on delivery. Like every service provider, that's typically where they start, right? Like your people are your product in a services business. So that's where they focus. And so marketing hasn't been a focus. Sales hasn't been a focus. It's been, founder led. But the thing is, they haven't documented all of the things that they do. They haven't standardized their services for it to then translate to marketing, for it to then translate into sales, right? So if your team doesn't know what you actually deliver and the value you're creating, how do you think, as you hire marketing resources, as you're hiring sales resources, how are they going to do that?
That's a really good point. I've never thought about that from that angle, which is, again, the purpose you're on this podcast, right? But I've always thought of, if you don't know what you're doing, how could you ever repeat it? How could you ever scale? I'm thinking of, again, on the other side, but
From an
it's very
operational standpoint, right?
yeah, yeah,
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying is like it's so integrated because you're thinking from an operational standpoint, hey, we need to get to these operational efficiencies. But it also impacts those other organizations. So when we're working with a client through this, it's okay, let's document this. Let's make sure that we do value mapping because then it's very clear of the value you're creating for your customers. That's going to turn into your messaging. That impacts your website, your campaigns, how you end up, your sales collateral, all of it, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's so many times when you then hire in those, those professionals into those go-to-market functions, and they're like, I don't even know what we do.
well,
And then they're promoting something that's not even scalable. And then, for example, pre-sales gets upset because they're being brought into unqualified deals, right? It's exactly
yeah,
what I mean.
or the client or sales or whoever has an expectation that we can deliver XYZ service when actually we can't. We're an ABC shop. We don't do XYZ. So well, and again, a large part of like a lot of these MSP organizations are started by engineers, right? And so we're all ours included. So we're all like oriented towards okay, like the technology and how do we deliver it well and how do we make sure like all that stuff. And I'll tell you just like from starting a business myself, and I mean you're doing this too, but like sales is hard, and marketing is hard, and having all that cohesive and it's difficult work, and so we've learned a lot having done it ourselves, but I love the idea of having someone that's kind of like external that can make sure that we're all pulling our own weight and providing that value mapping.
And making sure that you're not over investing in certain areas, right? Because you don't have to do it all. I think especially, entrepreneurs, founders, and especially if you came from a larger company where all of these things are in place, all of the things that need to happen and it gets overwhelming. And then you see other companies doing it. It's like, oh, well, we need to do that too. But the thing is, you need to do what's right for your company at your, stage of maturity. Okay. You taking on way too much is just going to end up becoming frustrating. It's going to, add on additional costs. It's really about being very deliberate about your investments and where are you spending your time and prioritizing. You don't have to do everything, but you just need to do it in a specific order so you can just continue to grow from there.
Yeah. And you have a great resource on your website. It's called the maturity model. So what's the starting point? And I have it pulled up in front of me, so I'm not going to pretend like I don't. But because there's a lot of data on there. But like opportunistic, right? Is that where you see people like kind of the starting point? They're just going after everything.
Yes, everyone has to go through that stage.
Yeah.
You just have to because you can have a great plan, but until you're out in the market and you're seeing what people are purchasing and what they want and everything. It's just a great idea. So everyone has to go through that opportunistic stage where they're kind of just doing everything and they're adjusting and it's ad hoc and, the marketing is, one-off, sales is all founder led, but that's a perfect opportunity to learn as much as you can about your services, about what are you really good at, but as well as where do you win? And then the trick is taking it and then applying it so that way you can progress to the next stage, which is repeatable. So that's the whole documentation piece, right? It's making sure that you look at what's your win-loss, right? Are there specific verticals you do better in, right? Maybe that you need to focus there. Are there specific client sets that are better, like it's SMB versus mid-market or whatnot? It helps you standardize your services. It makes sure that you have an actual sales process. And I would do all of that before you start adding on resources. Because what most companies do is that they go from opportunistic and they're like, okay, now we're going to scale. And then they start throwing in a sales director or a marketing manager. And then they end up getting frustrated because they're not doing a good job. And then they start firing and then replacing. And it's like this cycle, right?
Yeah, there's no defined process. I mean, if you haven't defined that and you throw someone in there, like, you're not really setting them up for success at all.
Right. Right.
Question on your maturity model. So do you see some of the stuff becoming more painful, like the larger organizations get? So is it better to try to solve it now, or at least build it into your culture, or, in the mindset sooner rather than later?
Yes. Because it's
Yeah.
hard. There's that idiom.
Not impossible, but just harder, right?
Right. Like, you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, once it's out, it's out.
yeah. So it's very similar. I've worked with clients where we're talking about Fortune 100 companies that have gotten to a size through multiple acquisitions, huge organizations, and they didn't have any of this. And it took years to get them to the scalable stage, right? And it was very quick functioning and still took years. So it is much harder later on. And I think people just, they don't realize that it needs to go in a certain process, and you have to prioritize, and you have to go through that repeatable stage, because it will pay off in the long run.
Yeah. Like, step number one, right? And we're not going to take all your thunder, because we want people to pay you for that. But step number one, is it literally, like, so you said just speaking with executives, or is it just getting everyone in the room, like someone from sales and pre-sales, delivery, and having that conversation? Is that a good just starting point to start thinking through this kind of stuff? Or is there a better way to start?
Yeah, it depends on the type of organization you are, and where you are from a size perspective. So when you're a small MSP, for example, usually it's only a few people. Like, so getting in a room
with you and yourself and I and Tom.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, like I said, it goes back to start to standardize all of your services, making sure that you then map it to the value you're creating. And from there, it goes into the messaging and into your sales materials, et cetera. Like, you just want to document everything across those areas. If you're a larger firm, that's when, and so typically our solution is for mid-market and enterprise customers. And that is where we bring in the organization, because they've already done a significant amount of work. The thing is, it was all over the place, and so it's jumbled up, and probably the information is not being shared across teams in the most efficient way. So in those scenarios, bring in together the team, but then talk about every single part of go-to-market. And what do you guys have when it comes to assets? What are the processes? What are the people that are supporting it? And map it all out, and then identify where are the gaps that need to be solidified, and where do you this is enough work right now, but we really need to fix this because it's a huge gap and it's impacting the rest of our go-to-market strategy.
Yeah.
That's kind of the approach to it.
Okay. And maybe this is a chicken and egg thing, but do you start with, okay, what services are we good at and how we're delivering them? And then let's back into, okay, well, how do we message that? How do we how do we sell that? Mm-hmm. Or is it the other way around? Hey, here are all the things we want to do. Right. And so no. I look at win-loss information. And this is why I said, like, opportunistic is such a great time, because you get so many opportunities, and hopefully you have a CRM where you're capturing all of this, and like where you won and where you lost. Do MSPs not have CRMs? Like, do you come across that a lot? I'm just curious.
Back in the day, they would use spreadsheets. Right? Yeah. Like, now I think CRMs are just so common that a lot of them are using it, and it's right. And there's so many out there.
I was curious. Sorry.
I think they have them. I don't think they're also using them. So that might be a different, like, they have it, but they're not using it properly. Yeah. So all of the information is not captured, right? But the idea is, you go through this process, and this, you can actually bring in your team together to to talk about this, right? So your delivery team, let's talk about your best customers. Which ones are the most profitable? Which ones are the easiest to deal with? Which ones have the least amount of tickets, for example? Less burden on your on your team or whatnot. You get all of that information. You get it from your sales team of, okay, which ones are, the fastest deal to close? Which ones stick around the longest, right? And don't churn. Collect all of that information and then kind of identify where do we want to sit. And from there, that impacts then what type of services you continue to add on to your portfolio, right? Because now you're developing it for that specific customer. And then your messaging gets impacted based off of the type of customer you're going after. Sales, they're more focused about, we're going to go after these type of accounts, etc. Right? So I always start with the customer data and looking at that, and then the multiple factors around it.
Yep. All right. So I think there's so much we could go into here. And again, we just don't have time for all that, right? But there's a ton of good stuff. Again, ton of great resources on your website. But okay, so kind of the point of this podcast where I say, all right, MJ, like what is a practical thing? What is like a tactical piece of advice? And I feel like we've talked about several of those already, but if there was one or two, like what would you suggest? Like what could you offer to people to say, hey, start here?
That is such a loaded question. Okay, there will be two things. One, documentation is key. Okay, so start it, set aside time, make sure everyone is on the same page of who do you go after, what do you do, what is your value, right?
So clearly articulating like really some of the core aspects of your business.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. That would be number one. A great test is, for example, if you go to different people on your team and you ask them, like, what's the value of our company? And if they all give you different answers, there's a problem there. Right?
Makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a test. Go test your people. All right. Number two. Was there a second one?
Yeah. Number two, and I think this is where it will just make you so much more effective, is do the analysis on your win-loss. Like try to identify what is your ideal client profile. Yeah. It is not just like, oh, it's SMB around this. Like, no, that's not an ICP. Okay.
Yeah.
So do the analysis. It's really important. And if you're not collecting the data, start collecting the data. Then that would be number three.
Yeah.
So you can then leverage the data. 2.5.
No, but I mean, I think, some of that stuff that you just mentioned applies pretty much to business in general. I think, right. Like SaaS business, MSP, Avar, solution integrator, cookie shop, I don't know. But like the value in identifying your ideal client, that persona and all the traits around that, like it's a very valuable thing to have. And correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I don't think that means you only serve them. I think you mean right. Like that's where you can build scale around and there's stuff there. Like if you have an enterprise opportunity and it's going to help you move the needle and scale the business, like go for it. I mean, there are inherent risks with both that with your ICP, maybe mid-market, and then also SMB. Like there are trade-offs. But to your point, being clear about at least identifying who the right ones are, like there's a lot of value in that, for any business, really.
Like I said, it's just about being more focused. A lot of people take it as like it's black or white, like you're going after them or you're not, but it's not. It's just the activity that you do when it comes to sales and marketing, and like building out your services. It just helps you focus those efforts, right? Think about how many events there are. And if you want to go to trade shows, right? How are you supposed to go to all of them and have relevant information for all of them, right? But if you notice that, hey, I do really well with, I don't know, plumbing companies, then just go to the events where there's plumbers, right? Get that process, in place where You send emails beforehand. You set up meetings ahead of time for the event. You're at the event, then you get them, and then you have high conversions. That's great. Now your revenue goes up, and now you can invest in other things, right? It just creates some focus instead of spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah, it's easy, people. You just got to do all the hard work. That's it. That's all you got to do. All right, cool. So MJ, tell us where people can get in touch with you, find more about Alveo. Give us some of that information.
Yeah, so you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's MJ, like Mary Jane, although my name isn't Mary Jane, but MJ, and then patent, like The Office. You can find me there, or you can check out alveostrategy.com. So it's ALVEO strategy.com. Fun fact, Alveo actually is Latin for the channel. And so that's, it's because
no one else has
all
provided information like that, MJ. So thank you for making our users smarter, for sure. Well, cool.
Course.
Well, again, thank you for joining us. I think you, like I mentioned earlier, just provide a unique perspective on things that, quite honestly, engineer-minded people don't think about enough. And so having someone that knows the IT channel and that can kind of help you untie that knot is hugely valuable. So I would, for anyone listening, I would highly suggest to reach out to MJ and team and kind of figure out where to go from there. But again, thank you all for joining us on the InScope podcast. Again, my name is John Scott. If you're interested in finding out more about ScopeStack, you can go to scopestack.io. If you're interested in listening to more of these podcasts, you can find us at scopestack.io/podcasts, and it's available on all the channels. So again, MJ, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch y'all out there.